Welcome to the Because I Love You podcast. I'm Bria, and I'm so glad you're here. You guys, this is a very special episode. I have had some pretty phenomenal guests, but this one might be hard to top, not gonna lie. You guys, welcome to the Because I Love You podcast. My dad, Carlos Jones.
Woo woo, Dad is in the house. So glad to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you, so thanks for joining. I feel like this is a very special episode. It's going to be a very healing episode, but our family's gone through a lot of things people don't know about, and there's been a pretty big secret that came out not too long ago. And today, I want to give you the space to talk about it and process it, and we do that together. But would you like to share what that thing was?
Yeah, sure. First of all, this is awesome to be able to come on your podcast, so thanks for bringing that out. One of the things that was brought to me a few years ago was the fact that the man that I thought was my dad was not my biological father. At the time, it was shocking. It was something that really just blindsided me, really took the breath out of my life. And it was one of the things that it was hard to deal with for many, many years because the reality that I thought of my life was not the truth.
Well, rightfully so. I don't think anyone gets to the latter years of their life when you should be focusing on like retirement and the exciting things of, becoming a grandfather, just so many milestones that you should be looking forward to in this moment, and then someone drops this big bombshell on you, which you're not expecting. None of us were expecting it. So this has been ongoing for a few years, and it's been something that obviously our entire family has had to process. There are so many layers to it, and I know that it hasn't been easy. How could you process something like this? And there's a lot of missing pieces to this puzzle.
Right.
I think it's fair to also mention that the difficulty with this information is that my grandmother, your mother, is deceased. So she would have been the only one to know the information that we needed to be able to move forward with this and get, those missing pieces. But we don't have that. So this has obviously been a lot harder than it normally would be in that case.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Mm-hmm. When this information was presented to me, your grandmother at the time had passed from Alzheimer's. And with that information, the journey started when I got a call from my sister. And that conversation was very, very harsh. Mm-hmm. There was some emotional anger behind it towards me for whatever reason. And it was one of those things that was on a Saturday I never will forget, that the way it came that Dad is not your dad. There was no information behind it. There was no, how did you get this? And with that, for 2 weeks, I didn't do the things that I typically do. At that time, I was pastoring a church. I had to let my armor bearer take over the last couple of weeks. I think I might even taken a personal day from work.
Do you remember what year that was?
I want to say your sister was maybe 1 year old.
Okay.
Right.
So that would have been about 2008.
And when you get something like that, Bria, you don't know how to process that. And in fact, I think I was just in shock. There was no anger. There was no bitterness, no resentment. It was just shock from the information. So I didn't go on a level of the emotional level of processing this, and I left it alone. It's one of those things that I did was I did not try to find that information.
Well, do you think that initially when this was brought to you that you did not believe it for a while? Because I feel like there was a big question mark of, is this information out of spite? Or is this true?
So it was both. I'm like, how do I go figure this out? And because of the way it was delivered and who delivered it, I'm like, this can't be true.
Yeah, we're thinking. I mean, I thought she was just mad.
I thought she was just mad too.
She was just saying some hurtful things.
Yeah, so I'm like, I'm not going to try to chase this down. I'm not
Yeah.
going to go look for this information. But it was enough to hurt me enough that I'm like, you know what? I'm thinking about this. Is it real? Is it a lie? To the point that I put some things off that I typically did every week to the side and say, I need to sit for a minute. But I made a decision that at the time, it cannot be true, number one. I don't want to know the truth right now. So I purposely put it to the side for at least a little while because the person who had the information was already passed away. But I did not know if the man that was still alive, who raised me, even knew that information. So look at this picture. What if that information came to me that he's not my father, but he didn't know that? So I didn't have that story. So I purposely did not move forward with trying to find that out. Thinking, what if this is true and he doesn't know that and he finds out that I am not his son?
When you say he, are you talking?
Talking about my dad that raised me.
We'll refer to him as your dad that raised
dad,
you,
right.
and then your biological father,
Right,
just to keep things clear. But yeah.
So I did not pursue this, Bria, simply because I was wondering if this was a secret, if it was true, did he know that information? So I'm thinking I'm going to leave this alone, and I put it to the side.
Yeah, so he didn't know about the conversation, the heated argument that you had with your sister at the time. So, of course, some information like this is detrimental to an entire family, an entire gene pool. So you were trying to be careful.
Very careful.
To not bring unnecessary hurt to people who, like you said, he might not even know. This could be just blindsiding him just as much. So that's one layer. But also, like, this is something you're still trying to figure out at the same time. So, like, it's not something you would want to speak on until you were like, I have the hard, cold facts, right? So it made this whole situation prolonged in a sense because everyone was dancing on eggshells who could talk to you. I think that was a big problem. It's like, oh, well, let's open the can of worms. And then everyone ran back into their corners. Right.
So no more conversation came from the sister by that. So about a year later, I know exactly where I was. I went outside, walked around in the driveway, and I called Dad, and I said, "Hey, this is some information I want to share with you. Did you hear that you are possibly not my father?" He said, "Yeah, well, you know what, that I've heard that over the course of years and whatever not." And watch this. He said, "It's not true. Your mom told me you were mine." Great. I believe that. I love Mom. Mom can't lie. She was an angel to me. So I left that alone, closed that lid for years, and left that alone, Bria, simply because Mom said it, he believed it, I believed it. So I took a step two. I went downtown Dallas to the records building, and I got my birth certificate. On the birth certificate is Dad's name. So I'm like, cool. So I put this case, this information to the side and just thinking this is some wild accusation that she's making because she called it on an emotional level that made no sense to me, and I put it away. So I was done with this for quite some time.
So you put this on the back burner and you took it for what it was.
Right.
Okay. And then what kind of reignited you to open this back up?
I can't exactly remember what time frame it was, but I would say that Mom's sister was a person that, you know, one of my other sisters speak to quite a bit. And I decided to give her a call and ask this question again and say, hey, do you recall hearing anything that Dad is not my dad. Shockingly, she said, he is not your dad.
Oh, so she just outright said it.
Yeah, this is Mom's sister, youngest sister.
Yeah. And she's in her right mind. Like,
of course, she's not sick. She's in her right mind. We would go see them on holidays or whatever now as a family. And she's a very kind, soft-spoken, lovely woman. And she's the youngest of the three sisters. So that was the older sister. My mom was the middle child. And with that, I said, hey, did you hear this story before that Dad is not my dad? And she said, I can tell you, he's not your father. Wait, what?
Wow.
Now, this is a sister who knows the truth about everything and everyone in this situation. When
she didn't dance around it at all.
She didn't dance around it at all.
And of course, like, I wonder if she was just kind of like, if he ever asks, I'm going to tell him, that kind of vibe. And you never asked until that moment.
And that was the deal that opened the floodgates, because now I have a source, her youngest sister, who knows the full details, because when Mom got pregnant with me, she was 20. She had just moved to Dallas, like when she was 19, whatever, now, and lived with her aunt. When Aunt Verna told me that, I knew it was a stamp of truth. Okay. No matter who said something differently, no matter who had a different story, her sister knew the truth. But she was not going to tell me until maybe, like you said, I would come to her, because she wasn't going to come to me with the information. But something just was inside of me was saying, that voice, ask her. And she provided that information. And that's when I went, wow.
I know you were shocked with that information. What has kind of gotten you to the place where you were like, okay, this is true? Was it that moment? So then you were like, all right, let's stop playing games. I want to find, now you're going from, is it true, to who is he? You're kind of shifting to that phase, or is there a break in between where you're not ready to know who he is? Like,
I think at that time, I am not even trying to find out who he is. At that time, I'm trying to find out the why.
Now, for timeline purposes, then, when was this conversation with Aunt Verna?
Maybe 2-3 years ago. So okay. This is the recent journey, because that's where the path started. This is where, but again, the information was given, and now I'm still processing it by myself. I'm not talking to anyone about it. I'm not asking anyone about it. I am processing this information, going, wow. But the why is this information hidden from me just started to fester inside of me and make me upset. Like, why didn't they tell me the truth? So now I go from knowing to angry. This has been years of giving this information initially. And then years later, I'm hearing a different story. So my mind is going, true, not true. And then I get the truth. And when you get that emotional swing back and forth like that, it kind of made me upset. So now I want to know, what is the information on all of this? I'm not even looking for who he is. I want to know the information on what happened in this me being born and not knowing the biological father. Now watch this. Right after that, weeks later, I hear the information that not only that is true, but her sister, the oldest sister, actually took care of me for a year after I was born.
So now you're uncovering a whole different layer of your story, where the first year of your life, you are now discovering you weren't even with your birth mother.
Correct.
You were where?
With her sister, her oldest sister. Now remember.
In where?
Oklahoma.
Which is also crazy to process. Very especially crazy. Now that I'm about to be a mom, and I understand that first year,
right,
you give birth. One, it's just the most formative year of a child's life.
Exactly.
They're hitting milestones every week, every month. But also you're forming a bond.
Exactly.
So, yeah, like your bond was not formed in a way that, of course, you could even remember. You did not co-sign that, nor were you informed about that. Because obviously, if you were informed about that, probably would have led to some other uncoverings that no one wanted to talk about.
Right.
So, yeah, you're having to completely process like layer after layer, and it's like, what else is there?
And when that information came, it's, again, that's information that's still coming to me, and I think that what was upsetting to me, because I wanted all of the information up
Like
front
what?
now.
Yeah.
And he's not the dad, confirmed by a sister, but the other sister raises me the first year of my life. Now, I love Mom's older sister, and I'm just going to say her name because she was such a blessing to me, my Aunt Cora.
So she's the one who raised you in Oklahoma.
I'd stayed for the first year, only for the first year, right? Now, here's what's very interesting to me. When I got that information and family knew that, on mom's side, family knew that, and other siblings knew that, the question came up like, well, we thought he knew that. I'm sorry? You thought I knew that?
What?
Yeah, people are going, well, what is he mad about now? We thought he knew that. How did you guys think that I knew that? So that tells me people were talking, Bria, about this for years.
Yeah.
That are in the family, on mom's side, on dad's side.
Yeah.
And even the siblings knew that, but I did not.
Yeah, that's kind of wild to me that was the assumption, but I think that adds a little bit of salt to the wound in that
it does.
It feels like everyone knew but you, and that feels unfair.
Okay, so you found your person. Now it's time to let the knot help you with everything else. The knot connects you to the wedding inspo, vendors, venues, and planning tools you need to make your day totally you. AJ and I are big fans of the knot. We used this when we got married, and it is such a great tool. From gathering inspo and scoring expert advice to finding your venue and figuring out your budget, they'll connect you to all the people, places, and tools you need. Plus, the knot makes it easy to keep your guests in the loop so you can focus on what really matters, which is celebrating your love with the people who mean the most. This may be the first time you're putting together something this big, this visible, and this meaningful, and the knot is taking the guesswork out of it for you. You get actionable inspiration and expert advice based on how they've helped over 25 million couples. You can plan anytime, anywhere with the wedding planning app with the most 5-star reviews. The Knot helps you provide the best guest experience for your family and friends, from collecting their address and easy RSVPing to providing seamless registry shopping, all in one place. The Knot has the most venues and vendors across any wedding website in any location. Let the Knot connect you to all of the people, places, and tools you need to help bring your wedding to life. Get started at thenot.com/audio. That's THEKNOT.com/AUDIO.
But also, if you were on the other side of the fence and you were one of the people who quote unquote knew, you probably wouldn't just be blabbing about it, right? You wouldn't.
Right.
Like who would think to come up to you and be like, "Hey, like how are you doing with this?" And like, when does it come up? When is it appropriate to discuss? And I think especially after the passing of Grandma, it just, there was no room to have the conversation. So like you said, it's a bunch of people with assumptions and no one's talking about it. Which, when I look at that, I'm like, you shouldn't be talking about it.
Right.
It's not your information. And I would probably do the same if I was one of them. I wouldn't be talking about someone's situation like that unless it directly impacted me.
Right, yeah, unless you brought that conversation up. So I'm born in Dallas now. Aunt Cora lived in Oklahoma on a military base with her husband then. So I'm taken from Dallas at birth, at whatever age, and then moved, and that's about a 3.5 hour ride from Dallas to go live with them. But I will say there there are things growing up, and this is just a blessing. I'm just going to call a blessing here. There was things growing up that whenever I got around her, for some reason, she felt like a mom. Mm-hmm. I didn't tell anyone that, didn't say it to anyone, but now I know why, because every time I got around her on Cora, it felt like being around mom, but I couldn't explain it at age 10, at age 12, at age 15, at age 20. I'm like, why does she feel like a mom to me? So in my older age, I find out because basically I'm getting my first milestones. Yeah. This is the woman who is feeding me, changing my diaper, whatever, not the first year. And she's always felt like a mom. Even until her passing, she felt like a mom.
100%. You literally bonded to Aunt Cora
exactly.
the first year of your life.
Exactly.
So, and the body knows that. Just on some new mom stuff, like you're literally the oxytocin that you're passing with that maternal figure in those early days is literally forming a bond.
Right.
And so while you didn't know that on a mental level, your body knew that on a physical level and probably even some spiritual level that like, this is the woman who raised you your first year, very important year, very primitive, very formative year, your life. Like your body knew.
Right.
So I find that very interesting and that you're able to piece together those signs like, hey, when I'm around this person, feels like mom. Were there any other signs that in hindsight you look back on? Did people ever make little comments that you were different or that you didn't look the same or like?
I know exactly. I think it was a Saturday. Mom and I were sitting in the living room, and I still envision it, but I didn't get it till after all of this conversation started, where it's a Saturday, I want to say afternoon, and she's sitting in a chair, and I'm sitting on the floor beside her, and I don't remember all of the conversation, but I do remember her saying, "You're different. Mm-hmm. You're different."
Did you hear that a lot from her?
No, I only heard that one time.
Okay.
"You're different." No one was around. I don't even think anyone else was in the house. "You're different." And I just took that because she always called me, you act like an old man, I was, believe it or not, I was a pretty serious kid, wasn't into a bunch of foolishness and whatever not. I was the oldest of the 4 kids, so I had to watch everybody, while they were at work. And it was one of those things that I just took it at, okay, I'm just that kid, and I would just kind of, analyze people, if you will, adults and things of that sort. But I was not the one that wanted to get in trouble because I had a responsibility to watch the rest of the siblings when they went to work. And it was things like that. And I remember a friend of mine, Arthur Green, my buddy growing up. Here's another thing that he was my only friend who came over all the time. We went to school together, and he would say, "You don't look like your family." And I'm like,
leave it to kids to point out the obvious things, right?
Yeah. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, "No, you don't look like anyone. The rest of them look like your family, but you don't." Now, here's a guy who was my best bud, who was at the house all the time, and I'm at his house all the time. So he's checking folks out. He did this. He did this when we were young. He did it even when we were teenagers. He's like, "Man, you just don't look like your family."
Like, man, you're not clocking it.
You're not.
Arthur Green knew.
And I'm like, shout out to Arthur Green out there who was dropping, pebbles out here for me. But, but as a kid, I'm going, man, get out of here.
Yeah. So, but you never felt. Did you ever feel like you didn't look like them?
No, that was something not for me even to think about.
Yeah.
You got to remember, even though this was a great group of people here, the family was dysfunctional. Mm-hmm. So there was too many things to look at and consider. And like I said, much love to everybody. If you got that perfect family, shout out to you. But you know what? We came from a family of dysfunction. We function in dysfunction, if that makes sense. So I wasn't looking to see if I look like who. We're just living and doing what we need to do. But we're young as well. So
Right.
there were some nuggets and pebbles. And then I look back and saw, people did greet me differently. They were kind when they greeted me, but I noticed how there was more excitement when they greeted the other siblings.
Really?
Yeah, but it was more of a voice would go up higher, right? And it was, hey, how you doing? But I noticed that, but I didn't focus on it, right? Again, I was a serious kid growing up, was not a talker at all. I did what I needed to do, and then same thing with school. I did the same thing. So those are a couple nuggets growing up, and you're like, you know what? God was giving me a few of his fingerprints along the way to say, hey, I'm showing you this, but you're not going to know all of it.
Right. You were getting little signs through and through that, I mean, obviously at some point were going to make sense later on in life for you.
Yeah.
So now you look back on that and you're like, I see why that happened.
Right.
I understand that tone a little bit more now. That conversation with your mom in the living room made a little more sense now. And so you've been given all these little nuggets, and now you're able to kind of validate your own experience. Like, okay, you have that information. So what have you been feeling about the situation? I know that's probably a loaded question because you're going to feel a lot of things, but what have those feelings looked like for you?
Well, let me take you through 2024. Actually, in 2023 is when I got it from Aunt Verna, but it's just processing that. No anger yet. But towards the end there, going into 2024, now my mind is churning. I am thinking and trying to unpack things of where this information is going. And when I started to go down that road, the sister that told me this came over and said, hey, I may have some information for you on who your biological father is. So the same one who told me this, that dad is not your biological dad, started doing her own homework to try to help me find out who is my biological father. And then I found out that dad had told her some years ago, because she was the first one that confronted him to say, I heard that you're not Carlos's dad.
Oh, really?
And then they were on a road trip to go see her son. She asked the questions to him, and it broke him in the car till he started crying. So she's been knowing it for years, and she held that, and maybe after that trip, that's when she came in and told me. But she was the one that I got this information, and she brought it to him, and he began to weep behind it. So she brought it to him that she knew, and that's where she began to say, I'm going to tell him. But the way it came was harsh, but also she was going to be the person to help me find out who my biological father was. So she started looking around and doing this on the side, not telling me she's doing it, which is great. Maybe that was her way to show me that, hey, even though I was foul, then I'm trying to help you get through this process, which is tough. So she would begin to bring me certain things and information, and this is what I have. She came to the house and sat down with me to bring this information to me, and that's where the journey started, that I then wanted to know who is my biological father, because first I wanted to validate if this is true or not. Then I wanted to find out who this man is that's my biological father now. And during that time, I went on a pretty emotional roller coaster ride. I'm good with it, not good with it. Now it went to anger. Now watch this. When it went to the anger part, it was the betrayal that I felt. How can you not tell me the truth? How can you hide this from me? If you love me, you would have told me. But people will tell you, well, we love you, that's why we didn't tell you. I believe that is crap. If you love me, you would have told me at the appropriate time, at an age at a time where I can do my own due diligence or you tell me where the person is where I can meet them. So when that happened here, now I felt betrayal by the person who's now deceased, your grandmother, my mom, and I felt the betrayal with your grandfather. Now, not his fault, but at the time, let's be transparent, I was mad at you, Mr. Dad, because you're the man of the house, and you could have taken ownership into this to say, now that she's passed, I can go ahead and bring the truth to him. But no one did that. No one had the strength or the courage to bring that information to me as an adult with my own 3 children for whatever reason. And when that happened, I made a decision that I was not going to speak to the siblings, and I was not going to speak to him until I find out who this man is that's the biological father. Because here's what happened. When I started processing that and going on this journey, the loss of identity hit me hard. Who am I if you're not my father? Because as a man, you will always identify with your father. You always identify in who you are. And that identity was very gray now because I don't know who the man is. I didn't even have a name at the time. And then that brought on more anger, more unforgiveness. And when I went down that path, I said, you know what? I'm going to stay away from everybody. I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to email. I'm not going to phone call you. I'm not going to come see you because I did not trust anybody. Trust was broken at a high level. I didn't trust the man that said I was his son because I came to you and asked you the question. You knew the answer and you lied. So I'm not going to talk to the one that lied to me. I'm not going to talk to the one who was hurting me on it. And I'm not going to talk to the other siblings here because I don't trust anybody. And when you don't trust anybody, it's hard for you to have a real conversation around this matter.
And that's justified. I think that part of this journey means putting up boundaries so that you can process and work through things. Obviously, like now you're able to speak to those people, but for a while, yeah, those are some pretty heavy feelings around a subject matter that completely changed your life, flipped it upside down. And all you're asking for is the truth. I mean, you're coming to these people you already know, and people are still playing the dancing game. And it's just exhausting and it's frustrating. You know, every day people, quote unquote, play in your face with this information is another day you're not getting closer to the solution or just having a better understanding of what is true.
Right.
Like, so it's totally warranted and understood why you would feel that way. And I think that was like a really healthy thing for you to do is like create some distance because like now you're questioning so much more. Like, who can I trust? Who can I talk to?
Yeah.
On top of a very hurtful bit of information coming out.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. You had those feelings and you processed it by creating some distance. Now, moving on to more of where you are right now. Do you want to meet your biological father?
Of course. Who wouldn't? And this is
well, let's pause there. Who wouldn't? There might be a lot of people who wouldn't. And even I think you said earlier too, and I'm just saying this to validate anyone who's watching that may connect to the story in whatever way, that it's not always like a given that you would want to meet this person, right?
That's fair. In order for me to get to wanting to meet him, I was still on a journey now because mind you, I just got his name. I just got the man's name 3 months ago.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? I believe I have the name, but I didn't even have the name. Watch, this is what happened. During 2024, when I said I'm not going to deal with anyone, April of 2024, it was maybe just before Father's Day. Your brother was cutting my hair, okay? And for whatever reason, my countenance changed, and he saw my countenance change. Now, mind you, I haven't spoken to anybody for months. My countenance changed, and he looked at me and said, "Are you good?" And I said, "I'm not." Depression came on me like a heavy blanket. I have never experienced depression before in my life. That was really hard, to the point that hit me so hard, Bria, that I was numb for a minute, and it was like the room went dark or something. And when that happened, I immediately said,
Gotta stop hitting your
I got to leave this house. I need to separate myself from everybody right now so nothing comes out here. So I got in my car.
And this was what day?
This was in April 2024. I want to say
It was Father's Day.
It was Father's Day.
I wanted to make sure we say that is a very important bit of information.
Yeah.
And the reason why I want to point that out, here comes the millennial daughter to the boomer dad, okay?
Yeah.
What you were experiencing wasn't just like, whoa, where did this came out of nowhere? It's Father's Day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, correction, it was the day before Father's Day.
Right, but it was that weekend.
It was that weekend, Father's Day weekend, yeah.
Yeah, it was that weekend. I know that much. And the reason that I bring that up, just, because it was not a coincidence that all of a sudden you're feeling the weight of the situation.
Yeah.
Okay? Everyone's talking about dad stuff. Every commercial on TV is dad, father. Whether you realize it or not, you were already at a low capacity with the situation, and now you have to see all the Father's Day commercials. This is a tough weekend for a lot of people, right?
Right.
So you had not processed the situation. While you may have felt your feelings, created some distance, I don't think, as someone who's on the outside watching you, I don't think you had processed the situation at all.
100%, yeah.
And held up the mirror to yourself and said, how do I feel? How do I really feel right now? And what am I going to do to start my healing journey? That had not been a thing yet. And to be fair, Mom's going through cancer treatments. There's a lot going on in our family. You're her primary caretaker. You weren't really given the space to do that. So, we can acknowledge that you didn't have that. But however, the body keeps score. Okay. Your body's not going to be like, oh, I'll wait till like after the cancer treatments are over. Nope. Your body is going to win, whether it comes out in a physical way or whether all of a sudden you kind of shut down. And that's what happened, is you shut down and went into a very depressive state.
Yeah.
And I've talked about, depression before, where I feel like, because I've gone through it a lot, and I think the women in our family, particularly on Mom's side, are very prone to depression. So I resonate with what you're experiencing, but you don't go through that. I'm familiar with that, right? And typically when I'm going through a depressive episode, it's because I am neglecting emotions, or I am focusing on the lack of something in my life to the point where it consumes me. So with you, I just feel like it's important to point out that at some point your body was going to confront you about the situation. And that's been my concern with you going through this whole journey, is that I don't want this to take a toll on your body and your mind, because it's all connected, okay? If you feel it here first, you're going to feel it here at some point too, right? You still have too much life to live. And I don't want this situation eating away at you. And I know us millennial kids are always like, go to therapy, Dad, Mom, like, because we do. We're the generation that is trying to break the cycles, and we're a little too self-aware on a lot of things, and we got the University of TikTok. We got too much that makes us feel like we have a lot of work to do. So then when we see our parents going through something, especially as traumatic as you are, I don't want that depressive feeling to turn to something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is a very pivotal, important moment that I think I'm glad that you brought it up, because I think that's one of the first times your body was saying, check in.
So when that, again, and isolation is not your friend. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Absolutely not.
So now that's one thing to say, I'm going to set up boundaries around, I'm not going to talk to, email, respond, whatever. That is something you can do. But when you isolate yourself because of the lack of trust to those around you, that's not a healthy place to be. Now, when that happened, not sure why I did this, but I went into action mode. I separated. It was a beautiful day. I separated and whatever not. And thanks to technology, I felt the urge, not thinking I was going to do this, in that state of depression, to record a podcast. And that is something with just me telling my story just on I used my mobile phone. I downloaded an app and recorded a podcast in my car the day before Father's Day, telling my story, how I felt, because that was a release for me. Going through that journey from the beginning to the end, I never saw this coming, planning that I would tell do a podcast in the car on who is my father. And with that, mind you, didn't have a name, didn't have an address, didn't have any of that. And recorded that and put that away, right? Came back to the house, felt a little bit better just talking into the mic of my phone, recording that, and came back the next day and enjoyed Father's Day. Now, on Father's Day, I didn't call Dad and say, hey, happy Father's Day. I actually texted him, which felt kind of cheap and cheesy to me, because I've always called him or went to go see him and say happy Father's Day, took him to dinner, whatever, bought him a gift. Didn't do that. Same thing with the brother. Just, hey, here's a, happy Father's Day. And to me, that felt just so cheap of a way of communicating and a way out to not say, I really don't want to deal with you. But the family knew that I was not calling them, because it was coming around that we don't hear from you. Nobody's hearing from you. That's why I say isolation is not your friend. Now I'm moving forward, but I'm not moving forward as 100% Carlos. I'm moving forward as a man who is angry, and it's showing up in different places in my life, as the way I talk, who I'm interacting with, very low patience for the slightest thing, getting angry very quick at the slightest thing. But again, trust and betrayal, I hate it. And I hate people lying to me just to go ahead and cover your secret. And that is the thing that bothered me the most. How could you betray me? How could you lie to me? How could you keep this secret for me? Now, looking back, what would I have done with that information at age 10? Probably not a lot. But as a teenager, I was a lot more vocal, especially at age 16 and 17 and 18. And it probably would not have been to my best interest to find that out at that time in a very dysfunctional family.
I don't even think you could have handled the information in your 20s. Like, even when you had me, like when it was just us, I don't think you were capable of that, having that information. And for context, my dad has he's lived like 9 lives, okay, guys? He's been CJ Star, the rapper. He has been Carlos, the pastor. He's worn many different hats and gone through many different variations of life. And I think the one where when I was a kid, you were like a hothead. I would label you as just kind of like, you didn't really regulate your emotions very well. No one was. It was just a different situation. And I think if you were handed that information it would have been really bad. You might not have a relationship with your family to this day if you were given that information.
I would agree, especially if your grandmother was still alive, and I think that I would probably be in a whole different place.
I do think everything happens at the right time, and I say that and know that can sound so unfair to you because you're finding out in like the latter part of life, right? But you were given this information at a time where I think you've handled it with grace, as much grace as you possibly can, in a way that is still helpful to not only you, but like the entire family.
Right.
And it would have looked a lot different.
I would say exactly 100% because at that time, I did not unload on people at my older age as I would have at a younger age.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference, because then it would not have been me just talking to you or the Zoom call. It's me driving to your place and I'm in your space, in your face, with a very bad attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Again, God knows what he's doing. So if anybody want to believe that there is a God, I am an evidence that there's a God in heaven. When that happened here, it was still a very low point. Now, and I have to thank God for me to be able to. I was not in that state a long time of being depressed, but I was angry for many months. And it came out in different conversation with people around me,
Yeah.
because I did not want to deal with it. And I would have to say that the turning point happened when I actually said one day, and your mom's been telling me, you need to go talk to him. You need to go talk to him. You need to go talk to him. And I wasn't ready to talk to him and get in his face. This is your grandfather. I'm not going to talk to him. So one day I said, hey, let's go have breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
We went to have breakfast. And here's the very interesting thing about it. We started to talk about it, and I began to understand his position. So my first question was, did you guys talk about not telling me? Surprisingly, he said, we never discussed not telling you.
Interesting.
So I thought that was a plan by mom and dad to say, whatever is going to go on, he's my son, he's your son, and we're just not going to tell him. I thought that was an agreement by those two.
You would have thought, because
we're not going to say
the way
anything.
he gripped to this lie for so long after you asked him,
right?
That's what I'm thinking too. Is she's like, you will take that to the grave.
I'm going to take that to the grave. But and now if he's telling the truth or not, I don't know. So I'm gonna hold on to that, because
that's true.
We know that's been other things before when I asked that and you said no.
Yeah.
And that's, again, I didn't trust people because you lied before. So I can only take that with, okay, at face value.
True.
I said, once she passed, why didn't you tell me? Well, it just didn't matter to me. I've raised you. You're my son to me. It just didn't matter. Okay, I give you that. Watch this. Now we're at breakfast. We're in a restaurant, so I'm keeping my calm and cool.
Mm-hmm.
I asked him, do you know who he is? What's his name? He said, no, I don't know his name. I don't know who he is. And all those people are probably dead. We eat a little more breakfast, Bria. Now watch this. 10 minutes later, all of a sudden, he remembers his name. And he gives me the man's full name.
Hey guys, it's me, Bria, just popping in to say thank you so much for joining us in this episode. This was a longer one, so we're breaking it up into 2 parts, and this concludes part 1. I'm just so grateful to have my dad on here to talk about something that is very intimate and sensitive to our family, and I'm really looking forward to sharing the rest of this story with you guys next week on Monday. So be sure to come back and tune in.